am very excited because we just have an event full of ridiculously amazing authors for you this afternoon. And on top of their ridiculous awesomeness, we have 2 new books that came out this week. So a virtual round of applause for them. But we have Winter Keep by Kristin Cashore, which is the newest book in the Graceling world. So yay! I know so many of you absolutely love that world. So you're getting more of it. And then we have Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo. And oh no, you're laughing. Oh, everyone's Vanna Whiting, that's why.
Yeah. I'm having so much fun.
But Last Night at the Telegraph Club,
to make a huge noise. So I'm sorry about that.
Oh no, you're fine. Last Night at the Telegraph Club though is it's so awesome. So it is a love story, but a love story in a difficult time of history during the 1950s between 2 women, and it's just awesome. Just like another air round of applause for it and all of the like scenery and everything that is created in this awesome story. And then in conversation, we have another author. We have a special guest, Tui Sutherland. Many of you are also familiar with her because, you know, she kind of wrote the Wings of Fire series, which is only like one of the favorite middle grade series we have in our store. So you guys are in for such a ridiculous treat. Before I pass it over to Tui, though, who is going to be our amazing moderator, it is the my Vanna White section of the intro. And that is, as many of you now know, the chat section is to the right-hand side. I can see all the amazing bookish love over there. And then down below, if you have a question where it says ask a question, as it would imply, that is where you can click and ask a question. I will say, though, we are going to have a lot of questions for this event. So make sure you read through the questions. And if you see one where you're like, it is imperative to life that this question is asked and answered, make sure you vote on it because you can vote questions up. And so we'll start at the top, at the most voted, and then work our way down. And then also, since these books are new, if you want to keep on seeing more of these amazing books, you can go down and purchase them where it says buy book and personalized book plate, and that's where you can get a signed and personalized book plate as well as the new books. So I am going to go ahead and end my spiel and kick it off to Tui. Have an amazing event, and I will see you guys at the end. Bye!
Thank you, Constance.
Thank you. Ooh, look at us.
We're all shocked.
On my book.
That was just so sudden.
I mean, this is good. I can see your faces more, which is also very exciting. So
can you see my fire?
I can see like the corner of your fire. Yes, I know
fire is important because it's book group. It's our book group fire.
That's right.
Yeah, I was gonna say hi, everyone. So, I'm Tui. Malinda and Kristin and I are all in a book group together here in Boston, but we haven't actually gotten to see each other in months and months, and I miss you so much. So this is very exciting. I'm just so happy to like see your faces and also have like, it's like hanging out with you on Zoom, but with like a chorus of people on the side being like, you guys are awesome, which is so lovely.
It's a little creepy though. You have a light in the dark behind your head, like coming at you.
That's true. I'm actually there. This one. Yeah, there we go.
It's a little less disturbing that way.
If I know it was going to be only visible, but I might have. You're going to be crashing while I try to hide this one. Okay, all right. It's better though than how I usually do my Zooms, which is with like little Wings of Fire ears coming out of my head.
Rabbit ears.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Reorganize myself. Hi, how are you guys?
Good.
Yeah. Are you hanging in there like book release week and also like world news and everything is crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a bit of a week to release a book in. It's been a little like there's an extra level of stuff on top of the already extra level of stuff that there has been for so long.
It's true. Although I did say this to you guys, but I really do feel like it's like the beginning of a new era, and to start it off with like the 2 greatest books like ever written has been amazing. It's like, oh, this is going to be a good year. Oh, I'm so happy.
Wow.
So for all your readers, like we're very glad you did this. It was good timing on your part.
Thank you. Well, and I remember there was a time, Malinda, like months back, where we were like, yeah, our book is coming out. It's going to be the last day of the Trump administration, our book. And it was, but like we had no idea at the time what that was going to be.
No. It's been a very weird week to have a book release. It really has. But you know, it's turning out okay. It's turning out okay. So I'm very happy to be here with you guys today.
Aw, yay.
Yeah.
So I think we talked about you guys maybe starting with reading a little bit from each of them. Are you up for that? I'm gonna nominate Kristin to go first. Is that okay?
Okay,
Sure.
yeah, sure. And just for everyone watching, this is going to be super short. I'm reading like less than a page.
I think
Just
that's
to give you a little.
we have so many
taste.
Yay.
Okay, so this is from the perspective of Gideon, who has just done this dramatic tunnel rescue of somebody, and he just fell asleep. He just got back home and he's fallen asleep. Okay. In early evening, he woke, feeling like a new man. He glanced around for the cat. Lovejoy, the world's oldest, scruffiest, and grouchiest animal, belonged to the royal librarian and always entered and exited Gideon's rooms by his bathing room window. The window was 5 floors above the ground, and the cat did a terrifying shimmying maneuver down the slope of a nearby roof in order to avail himself of it. The first time Gideon had seen the stupid cat half sliding, half barreling down the roof with legs akimbo like he was having a skiing accident, Gideon had yelled at him, then gone downstairs and yelled at the librarian, then determined to keep his window closed. But then Lovejoy had just come clunking against the closed window, the fur of his face and body pressed flat as he glared in at Gideon, outraged. Gideon, who'd been in the bath, had surrendered. He kept the window open now and tried not to jump out of his shoes whenever the cat came flying in like a piece of mail through a mail chute. Lovejoy was lying in the middle of the pile of letters on the table, blinking at Gideon. "Did you miss me?" said Gideon. Lovejoy stuck one foot in the air and bit his own bottom. "I missed you too," Gideon said. Then he pushed himself up and went to the bath. Sometime later, his skin scrubbed white again, his dark hair combed, and his beard trimmed close, Gideon went searching for the Queen. He found her in her lower offices, standing beside her advisor, Froggett's desk, looking over his shoulder, studying some papers with him, small, gray-eyed, serious, her hair in its usual dark braids. Something inside Gideon relaxed, and something else tightened. She glanced up, and her whole being brightened. "You're back," she said. "How was your trip?" That's it.
Yay.
Thank you, Kristin. That was awesome. Malinda, are you ready to go?
I'm also going to read a very short, less than a page section. So this takes place kind of toward the start of the book, where Lily has found a lesbian pulp novel at a drugstore. And she is amazed by it. She's never read anything like this before in her life. And she really wants to show it to her friend Kath from school, because she thinks that Kath might be gay too, but she doesn't know how to ask her. So she takes Kath to the drugstore to show her the book. And she gets there, and sadly, the book is not there anymore. So, "Are you all right?" Kath asked. Kath's fingers pressed lightly against Lily's upper arm. She saw both concern and curiosity in Kath's eyes. They were grayish blue, like the sky covered by a scudding sheet of rain clouds. Lily backed away into the corner between the science fiction rack and the rear wall of the store, and Kath followed her. They were quite alone now, and above them, the fluorescent light buzzed as if a mosquito were trapped inside the bulb. "It was about 2 women," Lily said. Her mouth felt so dry she might choke on the words. "That book, Strange Season, it was about 2 women, and they fell in love with each other." And then she asked the question that had taken root in her, that was even now unfurling its leaves and demanding to be shown the sun. "Have you ever heard of such a thing?" Kath's eyes widened briefly, and then she looked down at the floor and over at the science fiction rack and back at Lily, who felt her heart thudding like a drum, her blood rushing through her veins and turning her skin pink as she waited for Kath's response. An eternity seemed to pass. The heat of the fluorescent light on her head was like an artificial sun. The cash register at the front of the store rang like an alarm bell. Finally, Kath said one soft word. Yes.
Yay! Oh my God, I love that moment. Okay, I'm gonna jump just like real quick ahead because I've been wanting to ask you, Malinda, if that was a real book, Strange Season.
No, I made it up.
You did?
I made it up because I had to quote so much of it. There's more of it in the book. She reads part of it. And I just didn't want to and I wanted to use it in a certain way. So it shows up a couple times in the book. So I made up a whole new plot. I mean, it's not that big of a part of the book, but it was fun to write my own little lesbian pulp novel.
Yes, it was fun to read. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
All right. I'm seeing all this chatter go by, and someone is saying that they should be studying for their quiz, and I'm saying, no, I think you should stay here. All right. I do have I want to make sure I leave a lot of time for the questions people are asking. And I wanted to ask you a few that we talked about beforehand. And one of them is sort of like to introduce the books. Like, what was the first spark of the book for you? Like, what was sort of the first scene or character or image that made you feel like, oh, I really want to write this book. I have an idea that I want to do.
You have to assign one of us the question.
Okay, I'm going to start with Malinda then, since I made Kristin read first.
So this book started out as a short story, actually. It was published in this anthology that I have here, All Out, The No Longer Secret Stories of Queer Teens Through the Ages. It happened because I read this book called Rise of the Rocket Girls by Natalia Holt. And that's a nonfiction book about the women computers who worked at the Jet Propulsion Lab in the 1940s and 50s. And somehow that combined in my head with this other nonfiction book I was reading about a queer history of San Francisco. And they're totally unrelated, but you know how writers' brains are weird. You pick things up from various places and they come together and they create something. And in my head, these two books and my knowledge of San Francisco created this character of Lily. And I was she came from a variety of places, but she really came to me kind of whole. Like, I think she's very similar from what she was when I started writing about her all the way to the end. So.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you read a lot of nonfiction? Like, do you feel like you just happen to be reading nonfiction, or is that like, I don't know.
I do. Well, I was reading the San Francisco history for a different book that I was thinking of writing that I have still not written. And the Rise of the Rocket Girls I read because I'm like a space fan. Like, I love NASA. I've seen everything about it and I read all the stuff about it. So yeah, I read some nonfiction, I guess.
Oh, that's really cool. I know you're a space fan because every space book you recommend I want to read, and they've all been amazing. So.
That's right. I love the space books.
Yeah.
Same.
They're so good. Okay, Kristin, I'd love to hear your answer to the question. This first spark of winter.
Yes, so it's a similar answer in the sense that it's two things that probably are going to seem really unrelated when I say what they are, but for me, they lived in the same place of feeling and had to come together. And they were, I wanted to write a dorm book. I wanted to write a book that took place in a dorm setting. And in fact, in the earlier drafts, there's a lot more of the dorm stuff because in the earlier drafts, so Louisa Cavenda is a student who lives in a dormitory. There's another character named Nev who does not have her own perspective the way Louisa does. And in the earlier drafts, Nev also had a perspective. So there was more like dorm drama and stuff like that. And then also simultaneously with that, this gigantic sea creature who lives under the sea, who just wants to be left alone and hoard her treasures, but humans and other animals keep sort of forcing her into interactions. So like those two things, a dorm book and a sea creature might not seem like they go together, but they went together. I knew it was the same book. And then of course there was also this bring characters over from my previous books things that happened in this book. So that's like another part of the book. But it wasn't until later on in my planning that I sort of figured out that part.
Wow. That's so interesting. The sea creature, especially. I think a lot of us have felt like that over the last 4 years. Like, I just want to hide at the bottom of the ocean and have nobody bother me for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of what I'm trying to do with that character is this sort of like, no, I don't want responsibilities. I don't want to engage. This is scary and hard.
Mm.
Okay, fine.
I know, and then the other creatures that are like won't leave her alone, and then when they do, she gets lonely. Oh, it's so great. I love them. The giant sea creature of the multiple viewpoints. Well, her and the fox are my two favorites. I mean,
the two non. So my book, for people who don't know, my book has 5 points of view. 3 are human. 1 is a telepathic fox, and 1 is this sea creature under the sea.
And it's not just because I love animal perspectives. Like, they're particularly like lovable, and they're both complicated but very funny too. I don't know.
And they seem very much sea creaturey and foxy. I mean, not that I know what they're like, but in reality, but they seem very much like what they would really be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's how all foxes think. I'm pretty sure.
Thank you.
Especially Kristin, can I just say the scene where the fox talks to a little fox, like a fox kit? That's one of my favorites. Oh my God, the baby fox who's so easily distracted. It's worth. I mean, the whole book is wonderful, but that might be my favorite scene.
That doesn't surprise me, Tui.
Okay, I'm gonna ask an official sounding question. Let's see. I wanted to ask about genres, especially because Malinda, you've written fantasy, science fiction, a contemporary thriller, and now historical fiction. And then Kristin, you did like everything in Jane Unlimited. You did all the genres. So I was curious about like what feels different when you're approaching a new genre, and like why, I guess especially why historical fiction this time, Malinda, and like how did it feel different writing it? And also, yeah, I'm going to ask you that first.
Well, I read all sorts of different genres, so I love to read all different genres, and I think that I've always wanted to write all different genres. So why historical fiction? It's another genre that I love. So this happened to be the time that I was going to write a historical novel, I guess, which was kind of unexpected to me. Like, honestly, I did not think I'd be writing this book. It was my agent who told me it could be a novel. Like I talked to him about the short story and he said it could be a novel. And I was like, no. And it took me a few weeks, not that long. And then I realized he was right. So I had not been planning for a long time to write this book. But I had been thinking about writing a historical novel, actually. So maybe that had already been in my head. In terms of genre, I feel like switching between genres is, for me, less about the genre constraints and expectations than it is about the story being told in the book. Mm-hmm. So, like, within fantasy, right? There's so many different kinds of fantasy. And Ash, it was a fairy tale retelling, and I wanted it to feel very old-fashioned in that sense. And the sequel to that is Huntress, which is also a fantasy, but it's more of a high fantasy adventure. So it shouldn't feel as old-fashioned as Ash. So there's different tones depending on the kind of book you're writing, even within a genre. And I think I have to first discover what the tone and the feel of the story is before I can write it. Well, that's not true. I start writing it, I have no idea what I'm doing. And at some point in the process, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what I have to do. And then I have to go back and fix it. But I do feel it's less about the genre, weirdly, and more about the specifics of the story.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because they do feel, like each of your books feels like very specifically, like at a sentence level, like it fits the genre perfectly, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah, like from the very first sentence of each book, it's like, oh, I know what this is, and I'm so excited. Anyway, yeah, it's really cool. Kristin, were you happy to be back in fantasy after writing Jane? I know you also have like written other things that haven't been finished yet, but was it like?
Yeah, so I'm always happy to be wherever I am in my writing, and I always have a number of things that I'm thinking about or planning. I think it was really interesting writing Jane Unlimited because in that book I actually did sort of Malinda, I was with you like 100% with what you were saying about it, how it's not really the genre, it's the story you're trying to tell. But in that book, since I was specifically writing a book that breaks off into 5 different stories and 5 different genres, I sort of had to be thinking about, okay, well, what is a mystery? Right. Even though every book I've ever written is a mystery, you know, like what if I'm writing just a mystery, what is a mystery? What is a sci-fi? What is a spy story? A lot of my books also are spy stories, you know, but let's be specific. What is horror? What is fantasy? But anyway, what I was going to say is the interesting thing is, you know, I wrote each of those stories one by one, and each one was very challenging in its own way until I got to the fantasy story. And suddenly I was like, this is so easy. And it's so weird because when I'm writing my fantasy books, it is not easy. But something about like falling back in my familiar zone just was, I think I realized then, oh, okay. And it's not about like, oh, it's because I'm a fantasy writer, so that feels more comfortable. It's because I had been writing so much fantasy before. So, you know, now when I write a mystery, I mean, mystery is always so hard, but it's also sort of comfortable in the sense that I know what the problems are going to be. There are always a million other problems I didn't know about, but there are some problems that I know are going to appear. I'm not really sure what my point is, except that I think
it's so fascinating.
I mean, I think the wonderful thing is like the freedom. Like you have a story you want to tell, and it could take any genre form. I have a book that I'm still working on that started out as YA realism. It's probably gone through 5 drafts and it's YA realism, and I finally realized that actually it's an adult time travel book. But it's the same story, you know?
I think that's awesome.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I will say, like, yeah, I've always found it more comfortable to come back to fantasy. Historical fiction for me was the hardest thing I ever wrote because every sentence required so much research. You know, like in a fantasy, there's research, but you can make it, you know, fit the world. With historical fiction, I mean, you clearly must have done so much research, Malinda. Like this feels, every detail felt very real, you know?
I love research though. Like some people don't like research. I feel like if you don't like research, you probably shouldn't write a historical novel. I mean, just frankly, like I love it. So hi, Kevin. He's in the background there. So
pardon my butler is just on the fire for me.
Yeah, so I went to grad school for a very long time. I almost got a PhD in cultural anthropology, and I just love research. So for me, I think writing this novel was kind of like, wow, you know, this has all the things I love about fantasy, because there's actually a ton of world building involved in writing a historical novel. You're building a different time period and a different world. Like it's very different than our contemporary world, but there's also so much research involved, and I don't have to make it up. Like, I think this is great. I can look up what the weather was on a date and just use that, you know? I mean, or I don't have to. I mean, I'm not really that specific, but I like the fact that I can look up something and not have to make it up. And that sounds maybe that sounds weird to people, but for me, I find it kind of nice. And I just like that.
Really cool.
Can I ask you, Malinda, did it create this pressure, like this anxiety that you could be getting something wrong?
Did you
have to learn how to let that go?
I mean, there's always anxiety in writing, right? Like most of writing is like getting through your anxiety. I feel like
that's a fair point.
So yeah, there was that, but I felt like there was this stage where at the beginning, like I didn't really know much about the 1950s when I started writing this book at all. Like it hadn't been a time period I was particularly interested in. So I was surprised at how interested I became in it. And it got to a stage where I felt like I knew what was happening in 1954 in September in San Francisco. I knew what was happening. I knew where the places were. I knew what music they were listening to. I knew what was being worn and what they were watching on TV. Like I felt like the world at one point in my research came alive for me, and I felt like I could walk through 1954. It was very weird. And so at that point, I no longer felt so freaked out that I would mess it all up. But I'm quickly forgetting all that stuff. So I can't do that anymore.
Well, you created it for us. Like I felt that way too. I was like, oh, I felt so there, you know, and like because of all the details and all the like all the magazine articles and the pictures that you like really found and included. It's like it's very cool.
Thank you.
And that happens with me with research too. Like I learn it for the moment when I need it, and then I completely lose all of it. But the book holds on to it. You know, the book it will remain within the book. So.
Yeah. The hard part is when you're writing the same series and 15 books later, you're like, wait, what happened in book one? that can be its own kind of challenge.
You can just ask the internet.
This is true.
Yes, you probably have a wiki for your series, Tui, that you can just look at.
Yes, I do. Those kids are amazing. They're so good at keeping track of everything. I wanted to ask about like writing from multiple viewpoints because Kristin, you sort of touched on this, how your book has 5 viewpoints, but it didn't start that way, right? Like how did you narrow it down to those viewpoints? And like, how did you decide like what was the most important?
Yeah, so when I first started writing, I knew it was going to be from multiple points of view, but I didn't know in what way. So anytime I started writing a new section or writing a new chapter and there was a new character, maybe I would just write it from their viewpoint. So a lot of the people who are just secondary characters or even just very briefly characters in the book might have had their own viewpoint the first time through. And it was a little bit like some people write like that and it works beautifully. Mine was a little bit all over the place and it also wasn't necessarily what I wanted the book to be. So at a certain point, I had to really get serious about, okay, which are my most important viewpoints? I cut out Nev, which was the hardest one to cut out. She had a whole, we're learning so much about her veterinary schooling and her like, shitty boyfriend that she had and like all that stuff. You got into that a whole lot more and her recovery from the boyfriend, like all that stuff. But yeah, I really clung to Lavisa and Bitterblue and the fox and the sea creature, even through a little bit of pushback. I just was like, no, they're really important. And Gideon just became so important plot-wise, and also turned out to be really fun to write and expand on. So those ended up being my 5 points of view. And then it was just a matter of balance. Who is when and who have we not heard from for a while? Sort of figuring out that sort of thing.
And how they're all dealing with different mysteries, but they all like click together in the end. Oh, it seems very complicated.
Thank you.
Very complicated.
It was hard. It was a hard book to plot, but also honestly, coming off of Jane Unlimited, it was just like, I'll figure it out.
It's amazing.
It's gonna take a while, but like I knew I would figure it out. Like it wasn't easy, but I wasn't worried about it because I just was like, well, if I figured that one out, I can figure it out.
That makes sense to me. Someone is saying you could use Nev in a later book, maybe.
It's that's one of the little ideas playing around in my mind.
Oh, really? Or you can just share those extra scenes with me.
Yes, the secret book club. The extra scenes.
Except we never talk our own books at book club, except to complain about our own what we're going through, and I think that's for the best.
Yeah, well, especially because I don't know, like it was the least like exciting book clubs are when we bring a book that we all love, and like I think everyone's gonna love these, so we're all just being like, well, I love these books; they're really good. How do you do that? That was really impressive. That's what we're gonna talk about. And Malinda, you have multiple viewpoints in your book too because of those flashback scenes. With Lily, like, and I think you said maybe those weren't in the first version.
No, I think I went through at least 1 or 2 full drafts without any of those other point of view scenes. And it was just straight Lily, start to finish. So then I think it was Andrew, my editor, who suggested that having some adult point of view scenes would be interesting. And I remember thinking, but am I allowed to do that? It's YA. And he was like, yes, you can do that. So I wrote a bunch of scenes from the adult perspectives in the book, and there were some that didn't make it in, and the ones that are in the book now come between each part of the book. So there are 6 parts of the book, and between each part there's a timeline that indicates the historical context of what's happening and where Lily's family is in that timeline. And then there's an adult point of view. So that way you get to see what her parents were going through and what her Aunt Judy was going through. And she's in some of them too, but not as the primary perspective. So I really enjoyed writing those. Although I remember at one point I realized I had to write a scene about her dad and her mother and what brought them together. And I realized this meant I had to research World War II.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Yeah,
more research to add all that on. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that was that was some work. That was some work. But hopefully it's not confusing, and I hope it adds like broader context to Lily's story.
Yeah, I think it definitely does. And someone in the chat earlier too said like that helped add to the bigger historical context, like beyond the 1950s, which was really cool.
Yeah, and also the bigger family context. Like I loved seeing her mom's point of view and her aunt, who's just, I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah. I love Aunt Judy. She's one of my favorites. So. I loved writing her scenes so much.
And every Lily needs an Aunt Judy in her life.
Yes.
That's what I was going to say. Those of us who have had an Aunt Judy in our lives are very lucky.
Yes. Yes.
That was actually one of my other questions, because I think part of what makes both Lily and Lovisa so complex and believable is how much time you spent on their families and developing the family backgrounds. And I guess I was curious, did you start with the family fairly complete in your head, or is that something that changed, and did the character change as you figured out the family as you were going along? Kristin, I'll throw it to you because Furla is
okay. Oh yeah. Yeah, so I think so Lovisa has a pretty dysfunctional family, and I think that in some cases the scenes of Lovisa with her family were more like I came to the book already feeling those scenes. There's a certain extent to which I didn't need to plan them because they just came right out. And a lot of them are actually some of the scenes that were in the first draft and made it all the way through to the final draft. And then other parts of it, I definitely did have to plan and be more careful, especially anytime you were slightly further removed from Lovisa. So for example, I might know how Lovisa's mother or her father make her feel, but that doesn't mean I know why her mother is doing what she's doing or why her father is doing, and also with her little brothers. Actually, now I'm remembering a lot of what helped me work these things out is comments from my various readers during revisions. One of my friends, Marie Rakuski, wonderful writer, also suggested at the end, when Lovisa's brothers have been through a lot and they're having emotional responses to what they've been through, could I differentiate them from each other instead of all the boys, have this sort of samey reaction? What has each boy experienced? And just little things like that then create a sense of a more real family, and give it life beyond just the heart of the conflict between Lovisa and family members. So it was a process. Some of it I had from the start, and it was sort of I had the trunk and the roots, but I needed to do some extra planning work and careful balancing of things to fill out the branches.
Oh, that's lovely. Did she always have the 3 little brothers? Was that
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she always had 3 little brothers, and it was my first time writing siblings.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was, but not my last.
Oh, they're so great. I feel like they're so important to to make Lovisa like even more, I don't know about like if relatable is the right word or just like lovable, because the way she cares about them like adds a level to her that I really liked.
Especially when she's kind of being rotten to a lot of other people.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I was one of the people who actually liked it when Buffy got a little sister.
Oh, me too. Me too. My favorite thing ever. Ratty little sister.
Okay, I didn't like it.
I'm sorry.
Okay, well,
eventually, I was okay with it.
Tui and I have.
Yeah, we
I
did
mean,
too.
Tui and I have little sisters. I think.
We were like, oh,
Anyway.
she needs someone to care about like that. How about you, Malinda? Can you talk about the family, Lily's family, and how you developed them?
Yeah, I love, Kristin, your analogy with the tree and the roots, because I think it was very similar for me. Like I knew the basic structure of her family. And then as I wrote the book, I had to develop things, especially when I realized I was going to be writing about her from her parents' point of view. Then I was like, oh, now I have to do a lot more thinking about this. And so that came as during revision. One thing I learned throughout the process was it took me a really long time to figure out how Lily's dad could get American citizenship. I think I probably didn't quite figure that out until after the first draft. So in the book, Lily's mom is born in America. Lily's born in America, but her father was born in China, and he came to this country to go to college. And so I had to figure out a way for him to stay here. And because of immigration laws at the time, there were very, very, very few ways for him to legally remain in this country. And it took me basically through the first draft, at least, to realize he would have to enlist in the army and to get American citizenship, which I think maybe is one of the reasons that probably also led me to writing a scene from his point of view. So a lot of these things came during revision, and yeah, there's a lot that didn't make it in too. So, you know.
Malinda, can I just say that that's how Kevin's dad got citizenship?
Really?
This is maybe not for the whole world. This is for, maybe we should talk about that later.
Yeah, okay. It's very interesting because in the research I did, like so many Chinese American men, or Chinese immigrants in America who were men and if they could, they enlisted in the army for World War II, because that was the only way they could get legal citizenship at the time. So a huge proportion of them did.
Details.
Yeah. Okay.
So I have lots of questions, but I also want to make sure that we don't miss out on all these reader questions, because there's like 36 of them. So I'm going to jump to a couple of those, if that's okay with you guys. Especially this one I'm always interested in. This question is, what are your days like as authors? How do you balance writing and other activities while still keeping your motivation for both? Is a question from Maggie that I would like to know how to stay motivated. And how, oh my God, yes. What do you do when you sit down at your computer and you're like, ugh, I just don't feel like it? Malinda, I'll make you go first.
Yeah, well, we'll just sit here till you call on us like good students. No, I feel that every day. Okay, so it's very hard. But I've learned that I write in the morning on the days that I'm writing. In the days that I'm writing new material, I write in the morning. And I come up here, I sit back there. There's a chair in front of the window. Oh, you can see the ring light reflected. Anyway, There's a chair back there. I sit there, and I just sit there. I mean, the thing is, if you sit there long enough, you're going to be so bored that you will write something. So I don't go on Twitter on the days when I'm writing in the morning, and I just wait, because it takes me a long time sometimes to get something. And then like 20 minutes before I can be freed to go eat lunch, I will suddenly write like 1,000 words.
Oh my God.
But the previous 2 hours and 40 minutes wrote nothing. So
it's really nice to hear.
That's how I do it. I just sit there until it happens, because I get too bored sitting there doing nothing.
Wow.
And it happens. And then there are good days where it comes much faster, but on the bad days, it is like that.
Wait, and then do you come back after lunch and do it again, or are you like, I'm done at lunch?
It depends on the schedule. Like because when I'm first drafting, I usually have a word count goal. Like I want to get like 500 or 1,000 words. And if I get to 1,000 words, I stop.
That's a lot.
I don't do it anymore because then I get depressed the next day. If I wrote like 1,500 words and the next day it's like, but during revision, when I'm revising, I usually work all day. I can do a lot more when I'm revising. It's the first draft is like pulling teeth, and I often hate the first draft a lot. So,
Aww. See, I totally cheat with my word count. I'm like, I wrote 1,500 words yesterday. Today I can get away with 500, and then I'm gonna watch TV.
That's what would happen. That's what would happen. See, you just have to stop and then come back the next day.
Yeah, I've heard that like even stopping mid-sentence is actually like there are authors who do that because then they know exactly where they're going to pick up when they come back, which I can't imagine. I usually write until my children make me stop or until it's like 4 a.m. and I should probably go to bed. How about you, Kristin? What's your like day like? I know you, well, I won't give it away.
Yeah. Well, so I have a couple tools that are actually really helpful for me. One is that I have an office outside the home. So, and in the beginning of the pandemic, I wasn't going, but then we figured out, like we closed off my air vent and figured out some solutions so I could go and never encounter anybody and never touch anything that's a common space thing. And so I go and I'm there and I know, well, I'm here to do this thing. If I leave and I haven't done it, I'm going to feel pretty crappy. And also, the internet there was so expensive because business internet is outrageously expensive. We were spending $200 a month for my office internet. So when the pandemic hit and I wasn't going to the office, we canceled it. So now I don't even have internet at the office.
Wow.
And I also write by hand. So I also don't have a computer at the office. I have my phone and then I have my paper notebook. But on my phone, I use the Forest app where you grow trees. And if you pick up your phone and start using it, you will kill the trees you're growing. And that makes you sad because you have killed these really adorable trees and there are these dead trees in your forest. So I use that to keep myself off my phone. Nonetheless, there's still it's still like Malinda, I get there and it's like the number of things you can find to do in this little space that isn't even your home are like astonishing before you finally get yourself to sit down and write. I have a Post-it note on the window that says, the only thing that will make you feel better is having written. And I know that's true. So often that is what will motivate me to get started, knowing how bad I'm going to feel later if I don't get started now.
Future guilt. That's what it is.
Yeah. I do want a feeling of my life is purposeless, if I don't write.
Quitting Twitter is really key, I have to say. Because if you're not on social media, Kristin, and I'm not on it when I'm seriously working on a book.
No.
I mean, that's why I'm not on Twitter at all, because I know I would spend the whole day feeling guilty about the people I wasn't writing back to instead of feeling guilty about my books, which is, more important, really.
And also lately news, like the news has been such a problem for the past few months.
Relentless.
There's so much of it. Yeah. So having news fasts as well.
Yeah. There's some talk in the chat about word count goals and how to stop in the middle of a scene. So I just wanted to add one thing that I do, which is I'll stop the writing of the scene, but I'll make notes for myself about what's going to happen the next day. So so that when I come back, I'm like, oh, right, this is the exciting thing that my next scene will be about. And that I find helps me get right back into it a little better.
Yeah.
All right. Let me go back to the questions again. If you guys see any questions, by the way, that you want to answer.
I did just want to speak to something I saw flying by, which is that someone pointed out that I have written about siblings before because of BITTERBLUE and Hava, and that's completely true. And I'm writing more about it now. And I guess, sometimes you're so close to something you don't see it. You're right. I do write about siblings.
But that was also like found siblings. That wasn't.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Yeah, it's like its own kind of magic. Which, than growing up with like the little ones you take care of. But yes. The top question in here is, are any of you rereaders? Like you go back and reread favorite stories? And if so, what are your go-to books for rereading?
Rebecca.
I'm about to reread that. I'm not kidding. I bought myself the Everyman Library hardcover edition for Christmas, and I'm literally about to start reading it again.
That sounds nice.
Yes,
That
I'm very
book
excited.
is unbelievable.
I know.
It's so good.
I can't wait.
Nine Coaches Waiting.
I love Nine Coaches
is
Waiting.
another one.
Yes,
Oh my
love
God,
that one.
It's such a good reread. Both of the audiobooks for both of those are also just so good.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if there's I don't do a lot of rereading. Like, unless, it's for something like this. I got to reread Ash, which was really fun.
I reread Anne of Green Gables in the middle of the night on my phone.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's a book I've read multiple times.
Yeah, that's a big reread as well.
Yeah. That one always makes me feel better about the world.
Yes.
This person says, as a teacher, I always like asking, what's the last book you totally geeked out about, and what are you dying to get your hands on next?
Ooh.
You guys have any favorite books you've read in this time, or?
I'm looking over because I actually brought a stack.
Yes.
Hoping I would be asked.
Yes, show us your stack.
Oh God, I hope I don't drop it.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so I'm reading. This is hard to see. This is what I'm reading right now. Oh, sorry. I just started it a couple days ago, and it is so wonderful,
Really?
but really heavy. She writes characters just so well. This is a book that, so I'm doing research into witchcraft for the thing I'm writing. And of all the witchcraft books I've been reading, this is one where I'm like, I actually want this for my own life, not just for research. She talks about things like things that are doorways in your life and the ways your memories can be powerful. And I just love it. Oh. So I want to write about this book in my blog series about writing, which means I have to reread it, and it's gigantic, and it's also, of course, about the plague. It's about two pandemics.
It's so good.
It's so good. Oh, it's so good.
It's so sad. It's so. I mean, I love it.
It's so sad.
I would reread To Say Nothing of the Dog Instead. That one's a little happier.
I did actually just reread that one a few weeks back. And then the last one I want to say is not out yet. It's called Six Crimson Cranes. And it's a book that I was asked to blurb. It's by Elizabeth Lim. And I hardly ever actually get to the books that I say that yes, sure, send it to me. I hardly ever get the time to read them. But this one, I'm so glad I started to read, because it's sort of an Eastern Asian inspired The Wild Swans retelling, but with other stuff too. And it's just so beautifully written. And I love the main character from the first scene. So, but it's not coming out until July. Okay, those are my books.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, let me tell you about some books I'm excited about too. I just read Something to Talk About by Meryl Wilsner, which is a contemporary sapphic romance, an adult romance, and it's set in Hollywood, and it was so fun. I have not had so much fun reading a book in so long. It was just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It's a slow burn romance. It was like dessert. I mean, it was great. It was great to read it this week when I was very stressed out. So this, yeah, it was so fun. And something that I'm really looking forward to is the fantasy book you just talked about, Kristin, reminded me that a book that I read in advanced copy is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan, which is also coming out, I think, in June or July. And it's kind of like an alternate history Chinese fantasy. It is epic. It is amazing. It is the most page-turning epic amazingness, and it's very queer in a real queer sense. It's fascinating, and it's so well done, and there's so much adventure and romance and intrigue and longing and war. I mean, it has everything. So I can't wait for that. She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. Yeah.
Oh,
Remember.
so
Thank you. I'm grateful that the book Mysterious Galaxy is like.
Oh, there they have it.
About these
Okay.
books for us. Yeah. So I'm looking over and jotting it down.
I'll just mention a couple because this one just came out. Amari and the Night Brothers, which first of all, look at this beautiful cover. So this is middle grade, but I know that there are some people who don't mind reading like a whole range of that kind of thing. And it's like Black Girl Magic. It's like Harry Potter, but with an amazing girl at the center of it, and she's like so cool. It has like it has great world building, and it's like really really fun. The Murderbot books. And I've talked about a little bit, I think, on my blog. I love these because the voice is really distinctive. It's like this sort of a robot, but kind of a person. She's working towards being a person, and I think technically Murderbot's an it, but in my head she's a she. I guess maybe it. I don't know. But anyway, it just wants to be left alone to watch TV. Could murder everybody, but really just wants to kind of like the sea creature. Like I could have murdered everyone, but I really just wanted to sit here and watch all my shows. And then I think the next thing I'm going to read is this one, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, I want to read that too.
Addie LaRue.
Cool title.
I know, right?
I mean, yeah, and cool cover.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard really good things about it. So
maybe we should read it for our book club. I know we can't, but just.
Well, yeah, we'd have to convince. I mean, so technically our book club reads kids and YA books, and this one I think is considered adult, even though she's written all the genres, all the different levels. But we could talk. We could probably. What was the last one we read? That was Tuesday Mooney Talks to Ghosts, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right.
That was fun.
Yeah. So
that was here. I think we even had a fire.
Right. That was in reality before COVID.
Right.
We made a playlist and everything.
Oh,
that's right.
That's right.
Oh, that was fun.
Oh, that was fun. I miss you guys.
I know.
Yeah. Do you guys see anything in the Q&A that you want to talk about?
I have
Look at the questions.
So there's a question that got a lot of votes, but I know also you've gotten this question a lot. So I don't know if you guys want to address it or.
Which one?
The one at the top.
Oh, I was scrolling past the top. Oh.
Malinda, I feel like you had a whole blog answering this question, didn't you?
I have written blogs about this before many times. I would like to, I always say this, I feel that a writer can write whatever they want, no matter who they are. They can write anything that they want. There's also a corollary. As a reader, I can read whatever I want. And I do not have to choose to read everything that a particular writer writes. And that's part of the wonder and joy of writing and reading, right? Like writing is an expression of art. It's an expression of someone's inner creativity. And there's no way I would ever want to limit another artist's expression, right? But as a person, as a human being, as an Asian American lesbian, I know that sometimes I don't want to read particular things. Like I don't particularly want to read any more books about Asian women written by white men. This is fine. I don't have to read them. So that's really how I approach that, because I feel like there's two different things happening here. There's the writer's creative and artistic life, and there's the reader's experience. And I don't know that one should necessarily influence the other. Because they're different, and I think that that's okay.
Thank you.
I would say from the just looking at it from a practical point of view. So let's look at my book Winterkeep. It has 5 points of view, 3 human points of view. 2 of the human points of view are white. I know people have different interpretations about BITTERBLUE. Some people interpret the Leonid people as people of color. So one of them is definitely white. One of them, it depends on your interpretation. One of them, Lovisa, is a person of color. Lovisa, I mean, it's a fantasy world, so I'm not super specific. I try not to map it onto any specific race in our world, but she has brown skin. She wears her hair in twists. and I'm a white woman, and I was writing that character. So first of all, it's a different world. So it's a world that doesn't have the history that we have here. But also, secondly, if I didn't write that character, if I didn't write her point of view, then that would mean that I was only privileging the points of view of the white characters in the book. And it's a book that has characters of different races. So I think just as there might be a problem with a white person trying to write another race for any number of reasons, I think there would be a problem with me privileging only the white points of view in the book. I'm not sure that I would like center a book around just Lavisa, although maybe I would now that it's in my fantasy world. I'm not sure. I mean, all of this is sort of constant question and thinking that's going on all the time. And oftentimes the answer comes together as you're writing or even as you're revising. So it's a constant important topic and an important thing to consider, and keep listening to the conversations and coming to your own conclusions about what you need to do for your book.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think as long as you're thinking about it, I think as long as you're and getting feedback, like I think people are.
Yeah, feedback is good too.
It's really helpful. Absolutely. I'm so worried we're going to run out of time. So two quick things. One of the questions I saw scrolling through here is about the craft, like the blogs that you've been writing, Kristin, about the craft of the different books you've read and whether you might ever put them together in a book. And I wanted to mention, in case this person hasn't noticed, that Malinda also has a whole series on craft that you wrote last year. It was like real good. So you should look for those too if you're interested in like craft. Like just lots of cool discussion about craft. We both do it really well. Have either of you thought of like writing a craft, like a whole book about that? I would find it very intimidating.
Malinda, you should just turn yours into a book.
Well, mine are on my newsletter. So I have an intention to put them on my website, but currently they're at my newsletter, which is it's at loandbehold.substack.com. And actually, I think it's linked on my Twitter or it's linked on my website. So you could go there and find it there. I don't know. I feel like I wrote it for a newsletter, so I'm not sure that it would turn into a book. Like I'd have to add things and make it into a book, which seems like a lot of work. So as a novelist, I know that it's a lot of work.
And we have other, I mean, I speaking for myself, I just have other things I want to write.
Yeah.
So maybe sure that's an idea, but like there's always going to be something. I'm always going to be wanting to write fiction.
Yeah. That's true. Like maybe when you've run out of ideas, if that ever happens, which I can't imagine. And actually that leads nicely to like, I think the big question everyone has, which is what are you both working on next? Kristin, I saw a lot of questions when we were talking about Nev, like what is coming next, and are you going to do more in this world? So
I have another Graceling Realm book that's in revision now. Going to start working on that again soon. It's about Hava. Sorry, I forgot. I can't believe I forgot her name. I just spent like a year and a half writing a book about her.
I did that all the time.
So that's on the way. And then right now I'm writing sort of a magical contemporary thing that takes place in the very present time, which is going to be a short book. I'm actually going to write a short book.
That's what you say now. We'll just wait.
I know this time it really, really is going to be short. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I feel like I've heard this before.
Famous last words.
When I told Kevin, he patted me on the knee and said, "That's nice." And when I told my agent Faye, she just sent back, "LOL." I'm going to show you guys that I can write a short book.
I mean, we're not complaining because we really love the long ones too. Like the more Kristin we get, the better. So Either way, it would be wonderful.
Yes.
Oh my God. I hope you can see the chat and how many people are freaking out about Hava.
Yeah. I cannot wait for that book. I'm so excited.
Melinda,
answer quick, Melinda, before we get kicked off.
Did we get kicked off?
Oh.
I wasn't sure.
I don't think
I can't
I don't know.
remember.
But go ahead, Melinda.
You won't get kicked off.
I'm working on a book. And it's it used to be a contemporary novel, but then the pandemic happened. So now it happens before the pandemic. So by the time it comes out, it'll be a historical novel.
I feel like they're going to have to like give that period a name because a lot of books are going to take place in that period. Books by anyone who doesn't want to write about the pandemic.
Yes. Oh, look, a cat. Sorry.
I heard someone calling it the Great Pause. Something about
that's
like
too nice. It needs to be something much darker.
Oh, no. Well, maybe not in my books. But I know what you mean. Yeah. Hello, cat. Oh my goodness.
Sorry, we have been overtaken by. Don't show your butt. But this is Ghost, and Ghost and I unfortunately have to pop on because it is the hour mark, and I have to be the bad guy and end the event, which breaks my heart because you guys have been such an absolute joy to listen to that I was like, do I have to like end the event? But unfortunately, we are at that time. So I just want to thank Tui for being such an amazing guest host, and Malinda and Kristin. Am I talking softly again? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Just loud enough.
Okay. But I just wanted to thank all of you for joining us. This is such a great way to spend a Sunday, and it felt like it was just getting to sit down and listen to friends talk about the amazing awesomeness of your book. So thank you so much for sharing them with us. It was just such a joy.
I love Mysterious Galaxy. I'm so sad we can't be there in person.
For the next books you just mentioned, though, I am crossing my fingers that we'll get to celebrate in person. And
oh my God, you guys, can we all go together? Like, I would be so much more happy if I could take you with me.
Right.
See the book together.
And I want to give a huge shout out to all the amazing readers who have joined us for this event. Thank you for all the love, support, amazing questions. Just like, you guys absolutely rock. So thank you for showing up and for all of the love and support. And on that note, we will go ahead and say thank you, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Tui, Malinda, and Kristin. And make sure...
Thanks, everyone.
Tui, you have a new book also coming out as well later this year. So
I do. I just got my new copy.
I was about to say, I did my bookseller research because I've linked everyone's new book at the Buy Book link. So if you want to pre-order or celebrate and buy these books this week, the link will be down there below for you. And thank you so much for such a special afternoon. And we'll see you all next time. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.